Welcome to a new episode of Shortcut, the podcast that takes you on a shortcut to developer experience, developer productivity, and product engineering. I'm Morten.
And I'm Marilag.
And we are continuing the conversation with Waqas. And we were talking about feedback in the previous episode.
Yeah, so we were talking about internal developer portals and, of course, how to get started, how to drive adoption, how to contribute, how to motivate your whole development teams to start contributing to the platform. And now we would like to talk about how they actually get both quantitative and qualitative feedback from both your users and your contributors to the platform that helps you decide on to the next step on how do you scale.
Yeah. There are many ways. So let's first talk about the quantitative feedback. Of course, you would like to know how the feature you did, how the users are utilizing it. So there should be some kind of a way to track your users, how they're utilizing. So if it's a page, you can have some kind of analytics software that can tell you, okay, how this page or this feature people are utilizing, how much time maybe they're spending, if that's relevant for you, how much time people are spending on the page, if it's a documentation-based feature, how they're utilizing, if they have to click a button and go somewhere. So these kind of metrics you have to keep an eye on. And also how many people are actually using the platform. So daily active users or weekly active users, depending on whatever is your preference. I have been keeping an eye on like last 4 weeks active users. That tells us a pretty good idea of how user base is going up or down. If it quickly goes down, then something might be wrong. And then comes the qualitative feedback part, where you go and talk to the users and ask the questions and try to figure out what kind of issues they're facing on a specific feature. So let's say you have a feature for APIs and suddenly you see a 20% dip in the user usage over the last 4 weeks. So you can go and talk to them one-to-one, have interviews. You can have surveys, which are popular in some companies. Some companies also have a lot of surveys too. So people are really tired of answering all the questions. But something that I've tried recently, I don't know who came up with this, but one of the leaders I know, they suggested this empathy session that we tried, where we sit down with the user and we just give them a time frame and say, okay, you use this feature and they have certain tasks to perform. And then we look at how they're doing and we ask them to write notes. And this gives us pretty much a picture of how their brain thinks, because we are biased, developers are biased in the features that they're developing. So in these sessions, we find out very nice information about, okay, how people utilize the feature. And then we go back and fix those things. There could be other ways you can have feedback within the platform, where when users are using this feature, you can ask for a feedback right there. You might have seen some of the online websites are doing that. How was your experience? It is annoying sometimes, but sometimes it really works. And these kind of combining these qualitative feedbacks and quantitative feedbacks, when you combine these both, you get some kind of a picture of why the adoption is going up or why the adoption is going down. And it can also tell you what to build next. You can align that with your, of course, company goals, and then pick whatever makes sense from that qualitative feedback.
Mm-hmm. And is it something that is typically come out of the box of developer portal product, for example, the one that you used, or is it something that your team needs to build themselves or teams needs to build from scratch, this feedback gathering?
You could use some existing tools. The quickest solution would be Microsoft Forms. If
So just create forms.
Yeah, create a Microsoft form and then send it to people. But some people are not very good with giving feedback, but they're good with giving anonymous feedback. So you should allow this, the thing with anonymity that some people are comfortable with, so they can give their honest feedback, and then you can work with it. But of course, it's better to have a feedback coming from a person, so you can just follow up to the person. And some people are vocal, and they really like to give feedback. So any kind of personality you have, you just cater your feature according to them. Just the focus is to get as much feedback as possible, so you can, iterate and do your feature properly.
And how often do you think it makes sense to get this feedback? Is it just at random, on demand, or?
Yeah, it's a good question. Some people, it's different for different people. What I've seen at different places, they're very strict on when you can ask for feedback. Some are sending all the service all the time. So it depends on what's your situation right now. If you have a good community, you will have easier time getting feedback from your community. If you don't spend time building that community thing, then you're left with either asking someone specifically for a one-to-one feedback, or you can also do empathy sessions, as I talked about before, or these surveys, Microsoft form based, or if you have a survey feature software that you're using already.
Okay.
What about measuring success? Because I imagine that in large organizations where you do have these initiatives where you create a developer portal, that the business also wants to see success, or you want to be able to show the business that you're successful. So we alluded a little bit to it before with some of the metrics that you have or using in regards to adoption and usage and such. But how do you measure success? Are there any specific metrics you look at, or?
Yes, there's a lot of metrics involved here. One is, of course, how many people are utilizing your platform in general.
Yeah.
And any platform, this number would be a good indicator how people are. If they like it, they will come back. If they don't like it, it's going to be going down over time.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is providing and getting feedback getting metrics for your features that you have on the product. So different features, feature A, feature B, how much usage each of them have. So if you have a user base of 100 developers, let's say, which are potential user for that specific feature, how many of them are using your feature? So the questions, if you only have 10%, 20% adoption rate for that specific feature, then you got to figure out why is the reason. If there's some kind of friction that is they're not using, they don't like it, the rest of the 80%, how do you get them to use the feature? If they have an alternative, is your feature does not cover all the aspects, and then that can also drive the adoption above. Also, important thing is you have to figure out, if you have experience before with analytics, you have to pick the right platform on how to do analytics. And then analytics should also be given to the product teams. So the product teams or just teams who are contributing to your platform. So let's take in case of Backstage, they have a concept of plugins. So if a team is contributing to the platform in form of a plugin, how can they track their feature? Because as a product team or as a platform team, you could do, because you own the platform, you own everything. But if they can also track it, so they can improve, and they are pretty much they can do everything on their own. They don't rely on you. That also gives them the opportunity to look into their users and improve over time. So there's many aspects depending on which one you want to follow. You can check the adoption, or you can do adoption on feature level, or the full platform level, or a plugin level, or a page level. So it's up to you.
Yeah. Okay. And when we talk about developer portals, it also really ties into developer experience. So I'm curious, and now that we're also talking about measuring, if you also do like developer surveys to get like a broader perspective on developer experience, if you have any experience with that, or if that ties into it a little bit, maybe.
Definitely. I also am a big fan of not having a lot of surveys, but that they are a good way to get feedback from the very large number of community. And if you can get let's say once a year or twice a year big survey that you can have sent to the full organization, and then maybe incentivize it. First 10 people get this or that, and people tend to reply more because you're interested in data. The more data you get, the more trends you will see, and then you will know what to do next. So yes, definitely surveys are good, but overdoing them would just make the developers tired.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Right. But is this something that you can correlate, like the developer experience or developer satisfaction? Is that directly correlate? I guess that's directly correlated to adoption number because, they're probably happy. That's why they are using it. But can it also be correlated to some other measurement of success that the business is very interested on? That's, let's say, for example, quality of the products that they're building, or time to market, or lead time to change, right? Does adoption equate to better numbers on the other side of the matrices?
If you're looking into those numbers, some companies do. They are looking at these different numbers at lead time to change, or some DORA metrics as well. There are some plugins also built in Backstage that you could do some DORA metrics. Okay. But if you want to do that, yes, of course. I have not tried those in my experience. We are looking at adoption on different levels, feature level, page level, and also overall platform level. And we also we have other ways to do that as well. For example, how much time, if it's a documentation page, and if a user is spending, 10 seconds, and if this is a trend, then something might be wrong. Maybe the page is broken, or if suddenly a lot of errors come out from one specific part of your product, then something is wrong over there. So that's a more metric for yourself as a team to, fix the platform. So there are these metrics for the organization, and then these metrics for yourself, for the team, to see, okay, if the memory is fine, if the CPU is fine, if how many 500 or 400 errors are you getting from the platform. So you have to keep an eye on different things to make sure that everything is under control, just to say.
But I guess maybe a measure of success could also be a little bit what we talked about in the previous episode, or the example of requesting a cloud subscription. That there's something around efficiency or developer productivity that maybe what the target of implementing a developer portal can be for the developers to be more efficient, or not have to work or wait so much to get, for example, or wait for someone else to provision you a cloud subscription. Yeah, so I guess that's also something like if you're very upfront about your needs or your pain points, maybe saying that, okay, well, we have a lot of wait time in various areas, or we request stuff via tickets, but we want to improve it with self-service. That is also something where you can then see, before we got started, we took us so long to get a cloud subscription. Now after the portal, it's much less.
Yeah. Exactly, and this is a very good metric to track, to see, okay, you really improved the time on asking for a subscription, or it could be access to an API, let's say, where before it was talking to a person, and now you can just go and do it yourself. So it is from weeks to minutes. So that's a lot of time saved. In that sense, last year we also tried that metric, time saved or hours saved. We tried to calculate it, but it's also hard to do, because some processes do not exist before. So if you don't have a before to compare to, it becomes very hard to tell you, okay, how many hours am I saving by putting it here on the developer platform? But if you do have a process which you were doing before, then you have a good comparison.
So that's probably a good advice, because you mentioned in the previous episode that the way to get started is to figure out the pain point. So maybe that's also a good time to start baselining your pain point. Like, why is this painful? And then put that into a number so that in the future you can measure your success.
Exactly.
And another thing you also mentioned about documentation and reading, like, do you also recommend measuring what kind of topics people really read about, or to measure, the interest in a certain knowledge or knowledge space? Also, if you have community, like, or if they're searching for a specific topic in the documentation, or searching for a specific community that teaches this kind of or shares about this technology, is that something that's also worth measuring, you think, in your experience?
Yes, I would say yes. If you're building something, this community features around inner sourcing, where you have a lot of focus as a company on inner sourcing, this is very important, because I'll give you a real world example where what we did was we started to track what people were searching in the docs and in general, and when we could see some trends, some keywords, people were starting to search for maybe some training, or when they were searching for mentors, they were searching for specific keywords. Who can teach me this? And that information could be taken to whoever is in charge for training, or maybe your leader who can bring in some training for that specific topic. And then that's how you know that, okay, this has been searched out of 100 developers. This has been searched 25 times or 50 times, and you do not have that capacity here. So you can bring in some learning resources and provide it to your user base, and then they can quickly find and start learning in that way. So there is definitely something here as well.
It's good. So now, we've talked about building all these features and then driving adoption, measuring success. And then the next natural step is to scale, bring in more features, right? And then I guess when the developers are very motivated, then they start building their capabilities into the platform. Do you have any advice for organizations that are scaling their internal developer portals on how to govern this, to make sure that you give the balance between autonomy to build things how they want to build it, but then following a guardrail? So are there any best practices for that?
It is essential, but it's not easy, because the platform team is, most of the things they're doing it for the rest of the organization. But when you have people adopting your platform, your consumers, as I say them, and producers, when you have consumers consuming your platform, people are liking, they're coming back. But when you have a lot of producers also along with you who are adding to your platform, then of course governance is a big part of it, because you cannot, so I can get a little technical here, you cannot look at all the pull requests, right? It does not scale. So you cannot have all the approvals on each pull request coming in. So if 50, 100 people are contributing to the platform, you simply can't do it. So you have to give the autonomy to people, but to create some guardrails, you can create practical things like code ownerships, for example, or you could have some shared components, shared things that people can reuse, and tell them that, hey, okay, we like what you're building and it's great, but to make the look and feel, for example, for the platform. So I'm talking in terms of front end, because front end should look exactly the same, but it's a challenge, because in case of developer portal, when multiple teams are putting in, they have their own people. If one person is designing for everybody, again, it's a bottleneck, and you don't want bottlenecks. But you would like to create design guidelines for the other people can come in and look at those guidelines and design something. So you don't have to keep an eye on everything. Also goes back also on the back end. How do they write plugins? How do they write a backend service? How do they write an API? If you have written good documentation, so everybody can follow it, and that's one of the ways that you can tackle some of these things. Of course, security is a big part of it. If someone is trying to do some things which security-wise would not be good. It's very hard to catch them because everybody's putting into the platform. But things like code ownership in Git, that can alleviate some of these issues, because you can only do stuff where you are the code owner. You can only merge code. As soon as you touch someone else's code, then they have to review your code.
Mm-hmm. And I guess also a lot of automations to do things.
Yeah.
Also implement.
Yeah. You have to, when the central team, the platform team is building something, you always have to remember that's going to be used by others, not just you. So you have to build it in a way that it can be reused by others. That's very important. Whether it's documentation, whether it's some components, whether you're writing a back-end service or a front-end component, it should be reusable by others.
So basically build templates.
Something like that, yeah.
And you have that like in Backstage, like what you call the software templates, where you can define the structure of, let's say, a feature, and then they can copy that or start from that and then expand it or extend that.
Yeah, it's a good feature, software templates that can be used in a lot of use cases for these things.
I feel like we need to have a T-shirt, the one that you said, I'm going to quote you on that. I can't look at all pull requests. That's true.
Is it a luxury problem or? Yeah. Oh yeah. So it sounds like also that doing a developer portal right can have quite a big impact on the organization, but also the engineering culture in the organization. So I'm not sure if you can share maybe a little bit from your experience in your current job, like where you started and where you are today, and how that developer portal has impacted the engineering culture in the company where you work.
Well, there is a big impact because you have to adapt to the way of the platform, of course, because there is, if depending on what you're using. Let's take an example of Backstage. Backstage is built a certain way. It's opinionated, so you have to adapt to that. So that change is required, definitely. But what that brings to the table is, of course, standardization of things. So you can standardize more. You can also have things, they have this concept of golden paths, where you can define golden paths for anything. So if you can reuse that, and as a product team, you can go in and this is a golden path that is something that is backed by my organization. Maybe if there's a license, it's paid, and I can use it. It's good go from everybody. You can just pick that and reuse it. Now you can't just use your own credit card and buy something. And so there are some things that impact. Also, you have this. If you have different workflows around, for every product team has their own workflows. It can also help streamline it. So I can maybe utilize something that you have made, and if I can find it out from a central place, then why not? I would like to save time and use something from you. And that is possible, of course, if you have something like a developer portal.
What is it? I'm curious if it makes product teams more autonomous, or because I think one of the things that I often hear from developers who doesn't have this kind of setup yet is that they feel like that potentially they are now being asked to do things in a certain way. It becomes less flexible, or there's not so much freedom as before, because now you're following golden paths, or it might feel like it's more set in stone what you can do or what you should do. But also, I think the self-service aspect is something where that's an aspect where I would feel that you would get more autonomy, because now you can go and pick stuff and you get it right away, so you can kind of keep your momentum of implementing your stuff. But how do you see that? Are teams willing to adopt it, or do they feel constrained, or do they actually feel like true autonomous teams? In the
start, I would say the places I work with, or the organizations that I speak with or spoke with in the past, there is some kind of friction because not everybody recognizes the value that it brings to the table. I read somewhere, I don't know if it's a code standardization makes you free. So if you are doing some thinking for me for some specific software. I don't have to do that. It is actually freedom. If I know if something that I'm using is secure and I know where to look for, then I'm not spending time finding out the right thing to do. I'll just take it and start using it. But the job for the platform team should be to make your life easier, to make it easy for you to, first of all, find information. So coming back to your first question about discoverability, make it discoverable for you and then make it usable for you. So it makes actually your life easier. There will be always friction when it comes to using something that is opinionated.
Yeah.
But I always focus on showing the value that it brings to the developer, and it's actually making the life easier. It depends on where they see the blocker. If it's the language, because it is, I mean, if you're using some portal, it is built on some language. And if you don't like that language, there are ways to cater. But we say to people, okay, so if you don't like to work with it, you can build your APIs in whatever language you want and just have your front end, because for front end, you have to use some kind of JavaScript based language, right? So just do the front end here, do your back end as an API, put it somewhere else. So there are ways to cater all of these problems, but you just have to, I think the first thing is to sit down and see what the problem is and try to explain every single thing to the developers. What's the benefit of first of all, utilizing it and contributing to it. And that reduces the friction that you get.
No. And I guess it's like you mentioned, it's all about setting the right mindset. It's culture. That's why I think it's also important, the community, because then, it's a feeling of this is community driven. We're all in this together. We're building this together versus having a team that provides service and then another team that consumes the service. So that suddenly becomes like a customer vendor relationship, and that creates friction, right? But we're all just building this so that we can build products for our organization, and then having that mindset and the community can help with that,
really help
foster that. No, it's all about the words that you use and the framing.
Yeah, I guess there's also freedom in adopting APIs over, let's say that you are forced to look at dependencies to each other. That okay, now we have to coordinate because I'm using something that you expose, but if it's an API, it can be versioned, and then I can work in my cadence and you can work in your cadence, and then adopt as the APIs evolve, right? So that there's also some freedom in that. I think I like that as well.
Great.
Yeah. I think in rounding off for today's episode, episode 2 of this talk about developer portals, we always ask our guests to provide a shortcut for our listeners. So given your experience with developer portals, can you provide a shortcut for how to be successful with building and maintaining a developer portal?
Yeah, sure. I would say start small and start from something that is already existing in market. So Backstage is a very good example. Just take it and start using it. Now they have an offering where you don't even have to implement it. They have it running in cloud for you. So use something that is already made by someone and then pick the quickest pain point you find and start to implement only that and get feedback. Yeah, that's the quickest way, I think.
Cool. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on
thank
these 2 episodes.
Thank you. That was fun. That's a wrap for today's episode of Shortcut. If you enjoyed our discussion, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite platform. Sign up for our Shortcut newsletter at our website, Shortcu.tt, and receive our latest podcast straight to your inbox. Don't miss out on our next episode, where we'll explore more about product engineering and developer experience in startup organizations from a CTO's point of view. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, and keep discovering shortcuts to engineering great products.